Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Christy and I live on a small homestead in Southwest Washington State. I moved here about a year ago after spending my whole life in California. I have about 20 years of gardening experience under my belt, but moving to this new climate has meant learning a lot of new things. Today I'm participating in a special collaboration created by Jessica of Roots and Refuge, focusing on trusted books for homesteaders. If you're a homesteader in the Western United States, I have two books to recommend to you today. The first one is the Sunset Western Garden Book, and then especially its companion, the Western Garden Book of Edibles. Trust me, these are two resources you don't want to overlook. So this book has been my go-to resource for years. It's kind of got a reputation as basically the Bible of Western gardening. Think of it as an encyclopedia tailored to gardening in the Western states like Washington, California, New Mexico, Montana, even Alaska and Hawaii are in this book. And actually even part of Western Canada is in this book too, so it's not just the United States. I like the original book because it has the most detailed maps for finding your sunset gardening zone, which I'll get to in a minute. The Edibles book focuses, of course, obviously on edible plants and trees, fruit trees, nuts, berries, anything you can think of is in here. But the main book has like lots of other, ornamental plants as well. So it has the edibles, but maybe just not quite as the same level of detail as this other one. What sets these books apart is microclimates. Like I said, this original one has some detailed maps. I'm just going to show you an example. We have Washington and Oregon on these two pages. And then if we look down here, we find, where am I? Oh, that's right, I'm at the top of here's southwestern Washington, and that's where I am. Technically in Sunset Garden Zone 6. You might be familiar with the USDA garden zones of plant hardiness zones is what they're called. But those really only factor in how cold it gets in the winter where you are. It doesn't factor in how long your growing season is or what kind of, how dry it is, any of that. If we're looking at USDA zones, in California, I was in zone 9B, and here in Washington, I'm in zone 8B, which doesn't sound like a big difference, but when you look at the sunset gardening zones, you'll see there is a big difference. So here we have the original book. For the sunset zones of growing seasons, they have, I think I counted more than 20 or about 26 different gardening zones. Compared to the US zones, there's only like, I think 11 of those, but there's about 26 of these. And so once you find on the map, you find your zone. I'm in zone 6 here. In California, to show you the difference, I was in zone 14, which between 6 and 14 is a much bigger difference between 8B and 9B if you're looking at the different types of zones. So once you determine your sunset zone in the main book, which is also in this book as well, it's just the maps aren't quite as detailed. That's why I like them both. But the information is still there. So once you have your zone, you just use the book as basically a reference guide to whatever kinds of plants you want to grow. And whether you have vegetables, herbs, nuts, berries, fruit trees, all of that is covered in this book. So for each plant type in here, it gives you guidelines for things like how much sun does it need, what kind of spacing do you need, how much water does it need, what kind of soil, how do you prune it, how do you fertilize it. All of that information is right here, and also harvest information and also dealing with challenges like pests and diseases. So this book's been really valuable to me, especially having moved to a different climate. For example, when I was in California, I had a nectarine tree in my front yard that I really loved. It was really, really pretty. It had like double blossoms when it was in bloom, and the nectarines were the best I'd ever tasted. And so when I knew we were moving, right away I knew I wanted to plant that same variety of nectarine in my yard here in Washington. Well, it's a good thing I had this book because I looked up that variety, which was called Double Delight. Let me find it for you. Here we go. Oh, I had it marked. So here we have, let's see, this chart spans a couple of pages, but it is covering peaches and nectarines in this chart. And so it's broken down into two sections. So basically you're just going to look up whatever variety it is you're interested in. And then I find Double Delight, which is the one I wanted to bring here. But to my disappointment, it only is good for zones 7 through 9, 14 through 16, and 18 through 20. So I'm in zone 6, so that means if I were to plant this tree here, it probably wouldn't thrive. So that was a bummer. But the good news is that this chart also shows you a whole bunch of different varieties that can be grown in your zone successfully. So you can look at it that way. You can just look down the chart where it says zones and look for something that has your range of zones. And then you can read the description of what that tree is like, what the fruit is like, and there's some additional comments as well. So this is super helpful for that. Another example is when I moved here, I did some research. I wanted to plant strawberries, and I had a favorite back home in California called Sequoia. And something I read online said that it said it was developed for coastal California. And so I took that to mean, okay, well, I can't plant that one in Washington. I'm going to have to find something else, which I did. I researched a bunch of strawberries good for the Pacific Northwest, and I found several. But recently, when I got this book out again, I looked up the strawberries, and it explained that the Sequoia strawberries are in here, and it says although those strawberries were cultivated for coastal California growing, they have adapted widely and can even be grown in colder climates. So that's good news to me. It means I'm going to try those out this next season. So personally, these books have been game changers for me as a gardener. I've been able to plan out what to plant, how to tackle pests and diseases without losing my mind, how to care for the plants, and it's been really, really helpful. So I recommend this to anyone who gardens in the western part of the United States and part of Canada. So if you're serious about homesteading and gardening in the western United States, I highly recommend that you check out the Sunset Western Garden Book and its companion, the Sunset Western Garden Book of Edibles. I will link both of these down below in the description if you're interested. Thanks for joining me today. If you found this video useful, I hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel for more homesteading and gardening tips and tricks. Until next time, happy gardening!